interesting to note that there was a fire on the roof of our house when he died. And they did barely make it, we're just barely able to put it out before it burned the house down. So, okay, now I'm going to introduce you to Greg, who is going to tell us about Gus Molton, who was born as a slave to the Taverners.
Good evening. Let me tell you about myself. Augustus Gus Molton. Now, my name's been different, many names, and they get it mixed up a lot. Sometimes my last name is Motes, that they put in the records. Sometimes it's Molton, sometimes it's Molter. But I was born in September the 10th of 1852 in Virginia. And you can see my name in the Thomas Taverner's will. And in that will, it lists the names of us colored people. Now, today we call black or whatever, colored people. And it said that I was born, and it said that there are names listed in that will of the colored children born to the family of Thomas Taverner. And Augusta is listed under Celia's name, so that's my mother. And along with that name, under that same name, is listed my three brothers. Lewis, Taylor, and Cornelius. Now, in that record of the will, I'm listed as being born in September of 1852. Now, from those, they kept records back then, and I guess there were some slave schedules. And around that time, I think my years, that there was probably 18 of us that was in that family as members of that family, as slaves, or part of that family. Now, when you look at the records, now, it's hard to find records sometimes on me, because they just didn't even pay attention to me, I don't think. And so, in 1880, I find myself in the census there, and I'm Augustus Molton. Now, they just fixed my name all over the place. And I was living at 105 Market Street, and I was 22 years old, and I was a domestic servant. And my birthplace was Virginia. Now, I didn't find my name. I looked around too. You know, I'm back here now visiting you all, but I went and looked in the records and found that I couldn't find myself any other place other than the 1910 census. And I found myself there in the Parkersburg district. And now I found my name, Gus Molton, M-O-T-E-N. Now I was black, I was a servant, I was 55 years old, and I was single. But I'm doing a little better now. I don't know, maybe just because I've been dead so long, I've learned to read and write more. But back then, I couldn't read and write. And I was living at the time in the home of a Morris T. Hall. And he was a dentist here in town. And he lived at 1015 Quincy Street. Now, I looked around and I found in the Parkersburg City directories, I found a place there that they marked down people where they lived and who they lived with. In the 1907s to the 1914s, I'm listed as Gus, and sometimes I'm listed as Augustus. I'm still in the Morris T home during that time, and I had an occupation of a coachman, or a houseman, or a gardener. Now, 25 and 32 city directories. I was living on Ferris Street here in town, and on Clay Street. Now, they were interesting people back in the 1930s, and around 1936, some person wrote a newspaper article about me. Now, I'm not sure it's a good characterization of me, but let me just read you what they had to say. They said, and this was an article from Friday, April the 3rd, 1936, from the Parkersburg Sentinel. They said, now, Gus Molton, M-O-L-T-E-N, sometimes inappropriately called Gloomy Gus. Why they called me Gloomy, I don't know. But it goes on to say that I was up in my 80s and apparently hale and hearty. Like so many of the older, and they call us colored, residents. I came from the section from Old Virginia with the Tavener family, in which I was reared, which he was reared. And for many years, he had made my headquarters. I'm kind of reading this and putting my name in here, but anyway. Made my headquarters at Wetherell Jewelry Store. And receiving from the members of the family, the Wetherell family, and whoever else owned that store, he said, they showed me consideration and even affection. Now, I was stalwart, frame, I had a good appetite that waits on good digestion, and sufficient amount of work to keep me busy and interested. And it said, unite, all this put together says, unite in making Gus Molton a useful citizen who is well liked in the community. Quite an article there, wasn't it? But on Monday night, July 13th of 1936, I died. And they had an article in the paper about me. Nice article. Let me read you that article. Okay. Gus Molton, aged 84, one of the city's best known colored men and a descendant of the old Tavener family slaves, died Monday night at 10:30 at Camden Clark Hospital after a brief illness which was attributed to the extremely warm weather. He had been a patient at the hospital last Wednesday when he became ill at his home on Clay Street. Molton, who was the last surviving member of his immediate family, had been employed by the Wetherell Jewelry Store on Market Street for 40 years. He became one of the city's landmarks through his long years of service at the Wetherell store. And daily, one could see him in front of the store in his black cap and graying whiskers, which I still have, sweeping the walk, and he would always nod a pleasant greeting to any passerby who would exchange greetings of the day. Molton is to be buried, I was buried at the old Tavener Cemetery in South Parkersburg, where his parents, were my parents, and other members of the former Tavener slaves are buried. Last rites will be held on Wednesday afternoon at 4:30 from the Franklin Funeral Home. Now the sad part is,